I awoke in the dead of night to a sight that filled me with dread. There she was, the old hag, hunched over my body, her decaying face twisted into a grotesque smile, her eyes glinted with malice. Hello everyone, Felix here. Today is Tuesday, November 5th, 2024. Guy Fawkes night, as we say in jolly old England. I hope you're all well. I just returned from a much needed break with my wife, Sarah. We spent an entire week in the Cotswolds. Lovely place, absolutely beautiful. Rolling hills, quaint cottages. Oh, it was everything we needed to recharge. I also wanted to say a big thank you to all the new subscribers who have joined us recently. Your support means a lot, and it's exciting to have you with us along for these strange journeys into the hidden corners of London. While I was away, the intern did his best to keep the channel updated. He's a good lad, and he told me he's even got that freelance at Virgil recording some tapes too. Apparently they're rather interesting, so keep an eye out for those. Okay, now let me tell you about something that happened during my trip. It's a story that honestly I wasn't expecting to come back with. The Cotswolds has always held a certain allure for me and Sarah. The rolling hills, the quaint villages, the charming cottages seemed like the perfect escape from the hustle and bustle of our everyday lives. As an archivist at the Bethnal archives, I do spend most of my days surrounded by dusty old documents and musty books. Sarah, a graphic designer, well, she's always buried in her computer screen, creating stunning designs for her clients. We both needed a break from our perspective fields, and the Cotswolds seemed like a perfect place to find some peace and relaxation. We arrived at our cosy bed and breakfast on a crisp autumn evening. The owner, a friendly, elderly woman named Mrs. Jenkins, welcomed us with open arms and showed us to our charming room. The exposed wooden beams, the roaring fireplace, the plush four-poster bed made us feel like we'd stepped back in time. Well, as we settled in for the night, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. The shadows seemed to dance in the corners of the room, and the strange chill in the air hung. Sarah, ever the pragmatic one, brushed off my concerns and pulled me into bed, wrapping me in her warm embrace. As I drifted off to sleep, a sense of unease settled over me. And lo and behold, I awoke in the dead of night to a sight that filled me with dread. There she was, the old hag herself, hunched over my body, her decaying face twisted into a grotesque smile. Her eyes glinted with malice, and her mouth hung open as if she was trying to consume my very soul. My limbs felt heavy, as if an invisible weight pressed down on my chest. I tried to move, I tried to call Sarah, but my body refused to obey. Panic setting as I realized I was experiencing what is known as sleep paralysis. This is a terrifying phenomena that I had read about in my research during my time at the archives. However, I grounded myself, I'm quite proud to say, forcing my eyes to scan each corner of the room, reminding myself where I was. Slowly I closed my eyes, focusing inward in my mind, and I began to recite a Latin incantation, the words coming to me almost instinctively. Non habes potestatem hic, barely audible at first, then louder as confidence surged through me. The words formed, my arm slowly began to move, and I felt the oppressive force start to lift. The hag actually recoiled, her twisted features contorting in terror, her gnarled hands clawing at the air before she dissolved, fading into nothingness. I had banished her back to wherever she came from. I lay back in my bed, my heart steady as I processed what had just happened. You see, over the years I had picked a thing or two up regarding magicka, ancient rituals and spells that most people dismiss as mere superstition, but now, faced with the reality of an actual malevolent entity invading my dreams, I was able to defend myself. The next morning I woke to find Sarah still sleeping peacefully beside me, unaware of the supernatural encounter that had taken place in the darkness of the night. I decided not to burden her with the details, instead choosing to keep my newfound knowledge hidden, locked away within the depths of my mind. As we explored the picturesque villages of the Cotswolds, I couldn't shake the feeling that the sense of a darkness hung over the towns. Shadows flitted at the edges of my vision, and the local churches were riddled with strange symbols, unmistakably Masonic. You see, these symbols suggest an ancient connection, perhaps to some hidden order or a long-forgotten ritual that once held sway over the villages. But the Masonic symbols, although hint at power and secrecy, I do find it fascinating that they are more spoken about and more aligned in people's minds with the uncanny than is actually true. For the modern Templar order holds more truth to those dark rumors, and they are the ones who operate in the shadows, twisting old beliefs into something dangerous while hiding behind the veneer of tradition, all in pursuit of their own mysterious goals. But, as Sarah always says, you, Felix, are a hammer, and everything you see are nails. Yes, I must admit, when you do get into this kind of business of the paranormal, you feel like everywhere you go there's something strange. Sometimes it can just be the wind, nothing more. As our trip drew to a close, Sarah and I found ourselves taking the train back to London. The gentle rocking of the carriage and the rhythmic clattering of the wheels on the tracks was a strangely soothing sound after the eerie quiet of the Cotswolds. The London tube was busy as ever, yet as we moved through the bustling underground, something jogged my memory about something. A story in the archives that has always unsettled me, and even today we don't have a solution. The story was about an entity that had reportedly been sighted on the Metropolitan line, the oldest of the London Underground lines, specifically between Finchley Road and Baker Street. You see, there's a strange occurrence that only happens under very specific conditions. Witnesses report that between these two stations, as the lights flicker and the train hurtles through the darkness, a man in a bowler hat suddenly appears, seated, reading an old newspaper from the 1960s. The paper is large, covering his face entirely, and he seems to be sitting there as if he belongs despite his outdated clothing and the strange sense of displacement that surrounds him. It's said he only appears late at night, when the carriages are nearly empty, and always between these two particular stops. The train moves through the tunnel, the lights flicker, and for 1 minute, he's there. He doesn't make a sound, he never looks up, he just sits, turning the pages of his yellowed newspaper as if it's still in the 1960s. People who've seen him describe an overwhelming feeling of dread, a sense that they must not acknowledge his existence. The air becomes thick, almost stifling, and the tunnel seems to stretch on forever, as if the train is moving through another world entirely. There are a few stories of people who have made the mistake of trying to talk to him. One account is from the late 1990s. It tells of a young man who, perhaps emboldened by the drink or simply out of curiosity, leaned over and asked the stranger for the time. The lights flickered again, and when they came back on, the young man was gone, vanished without a trace. The authorities chalked it up to a missing persons case, but those who knew the legends understood better. The man in the bowler hat doesn't like to be disturbed. Another witness, a woman named Clara, claimed she had saw him one Friday night. The train had been emptied out after a busy day, and she was on her way home. She said she felt it before she saw it. The chill, the sudden silence that fell over the carriage. When the lights flickered, there he was. She remembered the way her heart seemed to stop, her body frozen in place, and her eyes were drawn to the newspaper he held. She couldn't see his face, but she could feel his gaze behind the pages, an oppressive, unseen pressure that made her skin crawl. Clara didn't speak to him. She kept her head down, eyes fixed on the phone, praying silently for the train to reach the next station. And when the lights flickered again, the man in the bowler hat was gone. The air seemed to rush back into the carriage. The oppressive feeling dissipated as quickly as it came, leaving Clara shaken but relieved to see the familiar lights drawing near. Now, to wrap this unsettling account based on everything we know, I would classify this as a Class 4 residual haunting. Unlike entities that are inherently malevolent, this phenomena seems to be a lingering echo from the past. Perhaps a rifting time that allows a spectral figure to manifest under certain conditions. It is a haunting with a pattern bound to a specific stretch of the Metropolitan line, and it carries an eerie aura that impacts those who've witnessed it. I would suggest to protect yourselves, I would advise against acknowledging the entity. Do not attempt to interact, do not make eye contact, and whatever you do, never speak to the man. His presence seems to react negatively to any form of direct engagement, leading to disappearances that remain unexplained. Should you ever find yourself on that late-night train, be cautious. Averting your eyes and minding your own business might just be your best defense. This is something I'll be logging under Section Gamma 2 Phantoms and Temporal Distortions on Public Transportation. Remember, sometimes the most mundane places are where the unexplainable chooses to manifest. And so we returned to our normal lives in the bustling city, and I carried with me the knowledge that I was no longer just a humble archivist of the Bethnal archives. I was a wielder of magicka, a master of ancient rites and incantations. Well, almost. Ready to face whatever dark forces dared to challenge me. And as I held Sarah close, her trust and love anchoring me to the mortal world, I knew that the horrors of the night would never defeat me. For I was Felix, the magician of the Cotswolds. Thank you for listening today, and have a lovely, wonderful, explosive Guy Fawkes night.